All right, so I'm starting the recording right now, and I'm just going to get started because it's right on the dot. And we have a lot of things that we can cover today. I have a broad spectrum of people coming on and signed up for this class. It's an introductory class. So the reason that I put this together was because I got an email from a naturopath asking me, I've got this PANDAS patient, 3 sentences, what do I do? And I'm like, well, it'd be a lot easier if I could just give you a summary class. Would you be interested in that? And so this is for her and whoever else out there got the message. That being said, I have I have parents with long-term older autistic kids. I've got parents who have had recovered PANDAS kids. I have naturopaths and homeopaths on today. So engage with me and ask me questions so that we can get through this together. So let me just pull up my presentation. All right, and you guys know that there's like a little chat box here. So if you have questions, I'm looking at this chat box. Just go ahead and chime in, and I will try to answer whatever comes up. So another thing that happened to me recently, I'm in Seattle. It's beautiful here. It may be one of the only places in the country where it's really pleasant in August. That and maybe Maine and Boston and the Northeast. But I met a mom this past week, who's taking my classes, and she lives here, and she wanted to meet me. And her child developed autoimmune encephalitis at 15 years old, really deteriorated quickly, just became non-functional at school, sitting and rocking, and she wasn't able to figure anything out for him. She took him to all the doctors. She took him to the East Coast, took him to Duke, took him to get tested. He got, steroids and antibiotics and all the pharmaceuticals. Nothing really helped him. And she was at a loss, even here in Seattle, which has a lot of amazing natural medicine. She couldn't find the right pieces to help her son, who had been doing really well in school. And lo and behold, his sister, her daughter, was in college, and she dated a guy whose mother was a homeopath. And this mom learned about homeopathy through her daughter dating this guy whose mother was a homeopath that I know well, actually. And she ended up treating this boy, and now he's back to school again, functioning. It took a couple years. They did a lot of homeopathy, a lot of clears, and it was amazing. And she got lucky. She got lucky that she found homeopathy. And I had asked some of you guys for some feedback on what it is that you wish you had known about or would have helped you. And almost across the board, everyone said, I wish I had known about homeopathy sooner. Homeopathy saves lives. It is powerful medicine. And I'm here to kind of show you the breadth of what homeopathy can do beyond just the classical, what we learn in classical school for homeopathy, what homeopathy can do. Because there's so many kids, and I think you guys, everyone online today is aware of how many children are having problems like this. It's, chronic, but of epidemic proportions, especially with how much the pharmaceutical approach is being really pushed on us culturally. So any of you guys want to say anything about what you're looking for, just feel free to kind of type in. All right, so just a little bit about me. Some of you guys know me pretty well. Some of you don't know me at all. I've been doing, this fall is now 10 years where I've been seeing, working as a homeopath and a naturopath. I went to Bastyr. I'm an MD. I studied naturopathic medicine. I did the whole New England School of Homeopathy with Paul and Amy my whole time at Bastyr. And in school, I fell in love with homeopathy right off the bat. And so I was one of those like homeopathy nerds who was just only trying to do that in shifts and seeing as much homeopathy as possible. Homeopathy, when I was in school, I was on a shift with Nancy Mercer, who's a teacher at Bastyr, and we had a woman who came in for homeopathy, low income, and she came in a wheelchair. And she was shaking like this. You know, she was just like in her wheel. She couldn't walk because she was shaking so intensely. She was just like, you know, moving. And she was about to get a lobotomy. Like they were about to kind of basically cut into her brain because this shaking was a form of seizure activity. You know, she basically was handicapped by this, couldn't walk, couldn't pick things up. So we took her case, Dr. Mercer and I and the group of students. And Dr. Mercer is so quiet and she's so contained and sweet. And we discussed it and we gave her one remedy. We gave this woman who was shaking in a wheelchair one remedy. She got magnesium silicata, okay? It's not an average remedy, but it's not totally out there either. Nancy Mercer probably came up with it based on what she knew from the periodic table of elements. I felt strong about magnesium because there were a lot of themes of like passive aggressive energy in the family, a lot of cramping feelings, and I had already studied that remedy with Paul Herskew. So we gave her the remedy, sent her off, didn't hear back. She comes back into our clinic shift walking. Walking, doesn't need a lobotomy. Everything is pretty much better. She's done. Like her seizures are done. It's a miracle, you know, and that was powerful enough for me as a student to say, hey, I couldn't give a supplement to do something like that. I had to, like, that was the homeopathy. That was homeopathy working on a really deep level. And I know some of you, or a lot of you, have those experiences too. Anybody want to say yes, that you've had some miracle experiences with homeopathy where, you know, you've given a remedy to a kid and they just turn around, or they start walking, or they get out of bed, or it's an amazing thing. Anybody want to share? Okay. Right. So went to Bastyr, got really into homeopathy. I started practice in New York State. I went to New York State specifically because I didn't want the pressure of doing like broad scope naturopathic medicine where I had the temptation to prescribe pharmaceuticals and antibiotics. I wanted to just focus on homeopathy. Desiree says when we first started working together for the first time, her son, who has autism, didn't have any tantrums. Okay, excellent, right. So I immediately after moving out to New York, I started working with Pierre Fontaine, who was really well known for working with autism. And I saw a ton of that. After working with autism, that's when I got introduced to PANDAS and PANS, which is kind of a sub-unique diagnosis. And to me, it's kind of within the spectrum of autism. It's when there is a kind of a neurological break due to an immune condition where the child kind of just deteriorates into, in a way, autistic-like behaviors. So, and then I've treated all sorts of adults, treating the whole families. And this weekend, I want to share the methodologies that I found through treating all of these people, and essentially a lot of cases of deep immune dysfunction that have helped me in the last 10 years. Right now, I live in Ashland. I have a toddler, and my husband helps me out, and he runs. We together have an online private homeopathic dispensary called Source Homeopathy. And it started as just my own dispensary of remedies that just grew and grew, treating this population. And it's a way to really offer a wide variety of important remedies for clears at a easy price for people to be able to afford. Okay, so classical homeopathy, a lot of you guys know about what that is. It's essentially, and it's touted as the type of homeopathy you should seek out, which is great. You know, I've learned classical homeopathy. It's key. It's essentially a very deep case-taking process where you give one remedy to match the whole picture, and then you wait, and that can work. But it also can be really limited because you miss a lot of other cases where you need to do other things other than just waiting all of that time for that one remedy to work. I know how powerful one remedy can be. And I'm not discounting the power of giving one remedy to match the whole. That is consistent. I always support that. But given how potentially powerful homeopathy is, how can we expand our toolbox to include other things to make our homeopathic prescribing more effective? And for me, that's what I term as intuitive homeopathy. You know, at this point, I have to say I'm not classical in my approach. I would say I'm an intuitive homeopath. So I will prescribe sometimes more than one remedy. I will prescribe a remedy based on just, you know, kind of an intuitive, you know, this is what's coming to me, but I'm not going to be able to explain why this is coming to me. I give a wide range of remedies. And then also isopathic dosing. Isopathy is the idea of giving a remedy from the same substance that caused the issue. And it's a very alluring style of homeopathy because it's easy, right? And it does. It's so useful to give remedies from the vaccine or the plastic or the ultrasound or whatever it is that you felt caused the damage. That being said, the constitutional approach is always important to keep that in balance. I also, the huge differentiating point for me that I added into my practice at some point is muscle testing. Let's see, Desiree wrote, after 5 years of working together, he changed from a severely sick boy to a healthy young man. Still with some challenges, but so much more healthy. Yeah, you know, if a child or anybody is in pain, uncomfortable in their body, you know, really truly suffering, those are all things we can work with. If a child has missed out on developmental milestones that they were meant to meet at a certain age, that's harder. We'll get to that. So yeah, what really differentiates what I do is that I, at some point in my process, learned how to muscle test. Muscle testing is not taught in naturopathic school. It's not taught to homeopaths. It's kind of comes out of chiropractic school. But I found it to be really useful, one, because these are nonverbal kids who can't tell you what's happening. So we need to get really intuitive. Two, these are really, this is a very sensitive population. And so to help with the sensitivities and the aggravations, or to really get a grasp of what to do to try and rationalize it, is so hard. I did study ART testing taught by Klinghardt. I did the course. So this is my history with it. I was, you know, I started treating people online pretty quickly in my practice. And then I had these complex cases where kids are seizuring and having problems, and I have no idea what to do. I'm like, school did not prepare me for this. I can't repertorize this. This kid is so complex. Yet here I am, this parent is beside themselves, and I'm needing to help, what do I do? And my number one best teachers were moms. There is nothing more compelling than a mom who has done a ton of research to heal her child. And you know, there's nothing stopping most moms to figure things out. And this, because of that, they're very open-minded. So it was the moms who taught me muscle testing. Like, I would give a remedy, and then they would take it and they would just muscle test. How often should I give this? Oh, I should give this, you know, and I would say, okay, here's a 30C, take it once a week, you know, or here's a 30C, take it once a month even, you know, as a classical homeopath. And the mom's like, hey, this worked. I muscle tested that I should give this 3 times a day, every 6 hours. And then I'd see these massive gains and was just kind of like, oh my goodness, you know, how do I incorporate this? So, yeah, you know, I can do a separate muscle testing class, but I'm going to give you just the crux of how this all went down for me, because it's really quite simple. It's not complicated. And so I was like, all right, okay, so clearly muscle testing really helps with these complex cases. I had a mom who was very sensitive who I worked with, and I was like, could you muscle test for some of these other kids that I'm working with who are really sensitive? And she was a healer too, you know, she had started her own practice. She's like, sure, totally. And she had great success, you know. I was like, okay, great. And I was like, well, if she can do it, I can do it, you know. And so fast forward to where I'm like freaking out because I have these complex cases. I'm just like, okay, universe, like, I have no idea what to do. And this was the most important lesson in my practice, was understanding what grace really is. Grace is when you get out of the way, you get your mental state out of the way, and you say, universe, I need some guidance in what to do here. And so, and there was a book that came on to my path at that point, called How to Let Go and Let God Do the Heavy Lifting. It's not a super spiritual book. It's like a how-to book by this woman, Lola Jones, I think. And I was like, okay, I got to get my mind out of the way. And I just started muscle testing like this. I would stick out my arm straight out like this and say, does this kid need a remedy? Yes or no? And I was just doing this. I was literally sitting in front of my computer or at home at my desk, and getting really good results. So that's not to say that I didn't do the analysis and I didn't do the deep case taking. I just added that on top of my analysis and case taking. So it was, for me, a combination of left brain and right brain, you know, really, or at least trying to incorporate the spiritual and intuitive part of who I was as a practitioner into my process. So so I started doing this, you know, getting good results, and then eventually this was tiring me out, and so I started doing, you know, testing with my fingers, and that was it, you know, pretty straightforward. Essentially, if I'm telling a parent to start learning how to muscle test, I say that this is a rock, but say this is the remedy. I have them just stand up tall, hold it to their chest, and say, is this remedy good for me? And they don't have to know what the remedy is. You don't have to read it. You don't have to understand it. It's more of, is your body going to connect to the resonance of that remedy? And your body is kind of like the pendulum or the muscle itself. And as you're standing there, do you sway back away from it, or do you sway into the remedy? And parents who have kids in acute states, you know, who are flaring, for them to be able to dose a remedy instead of emailing you changes everything. Okay, it is really, really helpful when parents learn how to dose a remedy themselves, and they learn to be intuitive. And some parents realize that they can connect to their child's intuition too, that their children can choose their own remedies, which is an amazing thing as well. So, so muscle testing was a big piece of my practice. It still is. And to me, it's really about getting in touch with that inner voice of truth, that inner voice of the all-knowing, to help guide the process, guide the healing process. Any questions? So, muscle testing gave me so much confidence in dosing remedies, and the more I practice, the more it has become so natural. Yes, it's a matter of practice. All right. So the sensation process is one tool that I integrated into my homeopathy practice that I like. It isn't required, but it works nicely, and it's an intake process. It's a way that you can guide the person into what's going on in the body and try to bypass the mind. Because really, if we sit with people or we listen to our inner dialogue, our mind, it's confusing, you know, and oftentimes it throws us off in the wrong directions. And the kind of like with muscle testing, if you can get the person to connect to their bodies and start talking, they get more connected to their truth, more connected to what's needed. This also really helps with special needs kids, or when kids are, you know, in so much pain, but they can't describe it, and you need to understand what's going on. You're not taking the case directly from the child, you're taking it from the parent. And you and the practitioner and the parent are really trying to understand what's happening with this child. So the sensation process is not something that I came up with. It's Rajan Sankaran, who's just a well-known homeopath. It's his intake, this guy. It's his intake style, you know, and I just learned it from Pierre, and it's just like a really useful thing to integrate. So what I do to do this is have somebody close their eyes and just take a deep breath in and out. And maybe you guys can all do this with me. Just close your eyes and take a deep breath in and out. And just feel into your body. And just feel into any areas that could be bothering you, could be stressful to you. And then just feel into that sensation of how does your body feel right now? And can you describe it? And then as you describe it, it feels achy, it feels tired, I feel tense, I feel heavy. As that description comes forth, you just repeat back what the person is saying to you and say, tell me more. It's essentially as simple as that. Oh, it's tense. Tell me more. What is tense like? Okay, tense feels tight. Tell me more. What does tight feel like? Okay, tight feels like stretch. Stretch like what? Stretched like a balloon is stretched. It feels stretched and tight and hot. And then you say, tell me more what's stretched, tight, and hot. And you just really delve into sensation. And what you can really do is also say, close your eyes, and say it's the parent you're working with. I want you to imagine your child, and I want you to imagine them when they feel stress. And I want you to picture them in their body when they feel stress. And what posture do they go into? What look on their face do they have? How do they hold themselves? What sounds do they make? And imagine you are the child and you feel how they feel, and you're making that sound, and you have that look on your face, and you're all crunched up, or you're stimming. What does that feel like? Imagine you're them. So you put yourself directly into the child's shoes. You know, and if I do this with parents, very often parents will say, this is the first time like I've ever really understood how my kid feels. It's the first time that they actually let down the barrier of analysis and actually allow their body to experience how their child feels. And it's a really way of deeply, deeply connecting. It gets you out of the details and out of the head and into the core. And if you continue, you can continue this process for, 30 minutes or to an hour of really going inward and keeping the eyes closed and imagining how a child feels. A lot of the times I like to imagine how the child feels when they're most stressed and when they're most happy and most joyous and most in their element, because both of those polarities can tell you what's going on, and sometimes even if their happiest is the direct opposite of what's going on when they're stressed. For example, they say, I'm stressed when my head is exploding with pain, and I'm happiest when I feel like totally like I can just escape all of that, when I can escape it and just watch my iPad. That's a little bit like belladonna or stramonium. So I can do a demo of the sensation process at some point. Some of you might have experienced this with me already, and you can still do that at home with your kids all the time. So sensation process is great. It's just a really wonderful way. And some parents, when you're connecting into the body, and a lot of people like to go right back up into the head. They want to come into analysis, and you've got to connect back to the body. No, tell me more. How does it feel in the body? Connect to the body. And that keeps the kind of the deeper case taking, the really juicier expression of truth coming out. And when I say expression of truth, it really is sometimes when people just talk from their head, you're not getting good information. Because sometimes people lie. They don't even know that they don't even know that there's a distortion happening. So I can say this, for example, when I would see people coming into my practice, and some people would be like, yeah, my kid's really a lot better. And I see them, they don't seem better. Or they say, my kid's a lot worse and they seem a lot better. And you have to have some other way of gauging what's happening. And for me, it's really kind of getting to the core through connecting to the body, connecting to our intuition. Great. Any questions there? Anybody? So I use a really wide range of remedies. I created this book, and some of you know it, some of you don't. And I called it the Book of Life because it's really like, homeopathy is all of life, right? Plants, animals, minerals, energy. So it's remedies from our reality around us, right? And it's just charts. It's literally charts of plants, charts of animals, so that in one book you have like I even included undas and sal salts and gemotherapies and flower essences. I included charts of different types of kids. And I find this really important and helpful too. Say that you're doing a guided meditation with somebody and you are like, oh man, what's going to be helpful? And then all of a sudden that person says, I see a tulip. I see this beautiful tulip in front of me, and I feel there's something that just feels so important about this tulip. And then you look up tulip, and there's very little information, but what little information you can see fits. That can be an important remedy. Just because we don't have a wide materia medica on it doesn't mean that it can't be helpful. Same, no-sodes. We don't have materia medica improvings on Bartonella. One of the most important nosodes for special needs pandas and pans. There's no proving on Bartonella, mycoplasma, so many remedies, Clostridia. You know, these are remedies that I started to give because they came up on labs, because parents knew. They said, my kid is like racked with Clostridia right now, and self-abusive because of the Clostridia. And I gave the remedy, you know, to see what would happen, and it's useful. So sometimes nosodes that can show up on labs. Sometimes it can be a nosode that you really are just intuiting that there isn't materia medica on. You know, there's a lot of available homeopathic remedies out there, and we have to have some sort of a way of accessing the wide variety that exists. If you want to buy this Book of Life, you can email me. You guys have my email address now, and I'll give you the information. It's $30. Somebody in a current class that I'm teaching right now, she's worked for Sunset Publishing, and she's like, this should be a book, you know. So she's helping me put it into a little bit more than just a photocopy thing right now. But yeah, this is awesome, because it's just actually what it is it's based on this book, which is Sankaran Schema. And Sankaran Schema is basically all charts, and it starts with plants, and then it goes to minerals, and then animals, something like that. Like, it's really simple, and I use it so much in my practice that it's like taped up a ton. But I needed something more than this to include things like undas and cell salts, and then like all the remedies for the different groups of kids that I was seeing. So this Book of Life is my version of Sankaran Schema, but for, I've been using the word neurodiverse these days, neurodiverse kids. Somebody gave me that term, and it has a nice positive connotation to it, and it seems to be inclusive to the whole range of what's out there. But it's sold on the Source Homeopathy, which I'll give you the website and the password for that on email. So, okay, any questions so far? So, Book of Life, nosodes, you know, animal remedies that kids are obsessed with. You know, this sounds, early in my practice, I think I had this like very serious homeopathy kind of chip on my shoulder where, you know, if a kid, you know, was acting like an animal, I wouldn't just give the remedy from that animal. I had to, you know, it had to, everything, I don't know, I had to analyze it in a certain way. And then later on in my practice, I started to realize that a lot of kids, and a lot of special needs kids, they draw to them what soothes them. They draw to them the energies and the essences of the animals, or, you know, and truly there are kids who, this is not all kids, okay? This is definitely, I try to have some critical mind, but there are definitely cases out there of kids who are, say, obsessed with fish, or obsessed with dolphins, or obsessed with wolves or dinosaurs. And I swear I gave the remedy from that, and it was the remedy for that child. Like, it really turned them around. And that's not something to discount. I treated a child who was adopted, and he believed he was a rat trapped in a human body, and he wanted to zip open his human body so he could be a rat again. And all of his friends had rat names, and I didn't think much of it. I was like, I don't even think there's a homeopathic remedy of the rat, you know. And I took the case, and then I start looking, I'm like, okay, there is a proving of the homeopathic remedy of rat. And then I see all these keynotes under Ratus, which is the remedy, and it fit the kid. The kid was afraid of small things watching him, like little tchotchkes with eyes. He didn't like those. Those had to disappear. He was really into knives, you know. Those were keynotes. Afraid of something watching them. Obsession with knives. And then I was just, you know, kind of blown away. And that was a very important remedy for him. So that's something interesting too. I'll use, oftentimes when people have a lot of weird sensations going on in the body, it can be an unusual plant remedy. You know, I'll be in a guided meditation with someone and they feel like their nerves are being twisted and wrung off, you know, and I'm like, whoa, that's intense. And then Daphne indica has exactly that sensation. So, you know, using a wide variety of remedies, I think, you know, it's like the more, with homeopathy, the more laser specific we can get in our understanding and bringing awareness to what's going on, the better. Nosodes, a lot of strange stimming behaviors that neurodiverse kids can do. At some point in my practice, I realized that the behaviors are the behaviors of the bug itself. You know, at some point I kind of tripped out on the fact that I was working with an autistic girl and she was lining everything up perfectly. And then if you cleared it away, she would line it right back up again. And those behaviors that she would do would change with some of the different nosodes that I was giving her. So it was like the lining up happened with the strep, you know, the certain clumping of toys happened with parasites. And, you know, we would give the remedies and it would shift those behavior sets. And what's kind of crazy to me is if you look at strep under the microscope, they look like all these little balls lining up, you know, and right, it's like your immune system is so lowered, your boundaries are so down that, you know, that this, you know, looking at this across your eye, say you're doing this, like, is that what this flagella of a protozoa is looking like? You know, I have to question that. I can't say that that's how it is, but there's like something to think about. And, you know, manifesting the intelligence of this in a way parasitic or this life form, and giving it, you know, modern medicine has seen basically microbiology as an area to carpet bomb, right? What do we do when we are aware of any microbes? You know, we carpet bomb them with anti this, anti that, you know, and what's happened is that this microbiome is trying to gain its voice and understanding. These behaviors come out, you know, the Clostridia comes up in the gut because you've been on too many antibiotics. Then the kid just starts, like, you know, hitting himself. And, you know, it's just, it's the behavior of the bug itself. Yeah. So, and that's the essence of homeopathy. Homeopathy has always said that, like tuberculinum, you know, tuberculinum is an infection that shortens your lifespan. So people who need tuberculinum are doing all these things quickly to catch up with their life before they die, right? It's not a new concept. You know, minerals. If I'm prescribing minerals, I'm often giving minerals based on Jan Scholten's mineral theory. And he developed this within the last 20 or 30 years, and the whole periodic table of elements, and what that represents. That being said, standard homeopathic remedies like sulfur, phosphorus, and natmi are still fundamental and important to know, and you can go off those and still have good success. Drainage, flower essences, gemo. I don't feel this is the core of my treatment. In some cases, they are helpful for, I have found drainage and Unda remedies helpful for when cases have been on a lot of pharmaceuticals that have just seemed to block up the body in all sorts of directions. Gemos can work on a way that's kind of boosting the body or building the body back up in a way that just a simple homeopathic can't. Any questions? Please post if you have questions. So isopathy, I already talked about that, using a remedy of the same substance that caused the problem. Vaccine clears, you know, this is something that so many practitioners, is so simple in a way to do a vaccine clear and so deeply healing in so many cases. I feel like every practitioner out there is going to see cases of vaccine damage. It's real. So vaccine clears, drug clears. Homeopathic pharmacies now make remedies from pharmaceuticals themselves, and often it's combinations of pharmaceuticals. So it's like whole categories, because what often happens is that when someone gets one antibiotic, they get like 4 other types of antibiotics, right? And so you don't want to spend time clearing every antibiotic, but it can help to give a combination remedy of a bunch of antibiotics. Nosodes, the nosodes for clearing them. And when I say clear, clear is a term that I should define a little bit better. But it's a term used in homeopathy and with isopathy that when you give a remedy in homeopathic form, you're helping the body clear the residual damage and toxicity of that thing. You know, so a vaccine comes in and you give a vaccine clear. It doesn't clear the effect of the vaccine itself. It doesn't clear the immunity brought about, if immunity was brought about by the vaccine. It helps the body respond more effectively. It's like saying to the body, hey, work on this issue here. You're pushing the body to respond to that vaccine or that whatever residual pattern is there, and to kind of help push it back out to the surface. Does that make sense? Okay. Nosode clears can be so important. A lot of people are doing classical homeopathy and they've got a good remedy on board. You know, it could be Brione or Pulsatilla, a classic well-known remedy. But this person got strep throat treated by a ton of antibiotics, and what that did is it taught the body to say, I don't need to deal with this strep. The antibiotics are going to deal with this strep. Like the body loses the intelligence or is taught something different. And so we need to reteach the body how to respond to these infections. My feeling is that pharmaceutical medicine creates so many layers of suppression that isopathy can be really crucial beyond just classical homeopathy. Let me see. How often can you do a clear? We tried a clear of Havrix, but didn't see much, but I'm convinced it did a lot of damage to him. Yeah, so you can do a clear as often as it's comfortable for the body to respond. I would say in that case, it might be useful for us to have tried some higher potencies of it. Does it matter the importance for the clears? So that's such a good question, and there's a ton of questions I could answer around dosing. So there's one style of homeopathy called sequential, where you give remedies based on a linear order from most recent moving backwards in time, right? And that has a nice systematic approach to it. Okay, so if most recently you were given the HPV vaccine, let's start with that. And you work your way backwards. You can do things that way. You can do it from a clinical approach. So, okay, on labs, this is showing the most problematic, so I'm going to clear this. Or on symptoms, you know, I'll have a case that I can show to you where, you know, for example, the kid has all of their vaccines. Which ones do you start with? But they have a lot of liver issues, for example, like they have bad fat digestion, you know. Well, it might be nice to start with Hep B, which is like kind of a liver-oriented nosode. Or lastly, you can go based on muscle testing. You know, you can be like, okay, how much does this person on a scale of 1 to 10 need a clear vaccine? Okay, an 8. They really need vaccines. What vaccine should I start off with? Like, definitely, you muscle test it. Should it be the DTaP? Should it be the MMR? There also exists homeopathic remedies that are all the vaccines. So it's called Polycombination Vaccine USA. So it's like all the vaccines that are given in the US. And you can, there's some homeopaths who use that. I don't have a ton of experience. I tend to use particular vaccines. Some homeopaths and people, say you have one particular vaccine that is really crucial in helping. Say you give DTaP and it seemed to really help. You could give maybe just tetanus nosode as a part of the DTaP because you felt like the tetanus. In one case, DTaP was really helpful and the child had a lot of tight jaw stuff, and we did a tetanus clear and that helped that. Someone asked, what supports can you give during a clear? So cease, which is the term given to isopathy related to vaccine clears as developed by this Dutch homeopath, Tina Smits. So cease would say give vitamin C and zinc, Cease is training homeopaths who don't have a naturopathic background. So they made it kind of straightforward and simple, like give antioxidants to help with vaccine clears. Naturopaths have a lot more tools. I mean, you can give all this kind of GI and liver and kidney support. You can do drainage. I personally just like giving a constitutional remedy, and then maybe if a child is getting say a lot of GI stuff, giving activated charcoal, Epsom salts, baths, kind of keeping it simple. For the most part, a lot of cases that I'm seeing kids on too many supplements. And so if anything, I'm wanting to reduce the number of supplements just to give the vital force a little more space to do what it needs to do, and not have to, in a way, process all those supplements through the kidney and liver. So, and my sense is a lot of the supplements just have a kind of a neutral effect. It's not like a lot of them are having a bad effect, but maybe cumulatively, if you're on 20 supplements, I start to feel it can be bad. So anyways. So the general cease process for giving a clear is to do 30 C twice a week, followed by 200 C twice a week, followed by 1M twice a week, followed by 10M. But basically to go through the whole 30C, 200C, 1M, and 10M. And to be giving it once or twice a week. And if you get a good response, say you start at 30C and it's getting a good response, you stick with it. Stick with it as long as it's doing something. And then move on to the next potency. If nothing's happening, move up to the next potency. So to go through those 4 potencies, to give them once or twice a week, and then also to ideally give it in conjunction with a constitutional. So I can share a case with that. But, for example, if a constitutional Staphylococcus agria giving, MMR 30C on Monday and Thursday and Staphylococcus agria 200C on Saturday. That's week 1. Week 2 would be MMR 200C on Monday and Thursday and Staphylococcus agria 200C on Saturday. So, does that make sense? Okay. All right, so that's dosing multiple remedies. That can be complicated. This isn't needed in all cases. In some cases, kids respond well to one remedy at a time. They're sensitive. They do best with that. That being said, you can go really slowly with clears too, or you can go more fast, depending on the energy of what feels needed in the case. So this is the schedule of dosing. Oftentimes, I'll take the case and then I'll send an email with instructions. Week 1, take this remedy on Monday, Thursday, this remedy on Saturday. Week 2, and I'll give, 1 to 3 weeks of dosing instructions, and then I'll say, send me an email update. And then I'll just kind of send things out by email and then do a follow-up in a month. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So, yeah, the intuitive testing we talked about. I have found intuitive testing to really help with aggravations. I don't get as much aggravation when I am intuitively testing. Some parents that I work with liked the intuitive piece and they started using a pendulum. And that's fine with me, to me, getting in touch with intuition and really empowering mothers to be in touch with their intuition is a really beautiful part of the healing journey, because that intuitive part of us has been really systematically dismantled by kind of a masculine or patriarchy, that says, okay, your intuition tells you that you shouldn't be doing this, but this science paper tells me that I should. So the science paper is clearly right. So let's do it, and the mom's like, oh, okay, here's my flesh and blood. Go ahead. Your science paper says that's okay. I shouldn't laugh, but it's why? Why do we so easily discount our own native instinctual intelligence? For us to bring back a generation of kids from where they're at, it really requires, I feel like, women waking up to what's happening with their kids and really trusting themselves no matter what. Because what's out there can be confusing, but what's guiding you from in here is on point. Linda asks, what if the child has too many aggravations from the first week on a 30C and even something like asthma from it? What do we do? Can a 6C ever be used for vaccine damage? Absolutely. And so if you had an aggravation from a 30C and then asthma came up, that's interesting, because what I would say is maybe, first of all, let's find a remedy for the asthma, because sometimes, this is such a good question. Say you're detoxing DPT, which has pertussis as a part of it. And so coughs and asthma often comes up when detoxing DTaP. Sometimes small acute remedies like spongia or Drosera or cough remedies can help clear the residual of that. So I would try to kind of clear out what's there before moving forward. And then you could also do a lower potency. There is an amazing pharmacy. So I have a pharmacy that carries a lot of remedies. A lot of the remedies that I have are from Helios in the UK, from other parts of Europe, since Europe has amazing homeopathic pharmacies. But then there's a pharmacy here in the US called I&E Organics. They're closed on break right now, but they can make remedies, anything that you want, and they definitely have vaccine remedies in 6C. And you can also, sometimes I feel like, be more subtle. Even sometimes parents who are like, wow, this remedy is so strong, it's such a strong effect. I'm like, okay, well, let's try this. Dilute your remedy in 4 cups of water. This is actually something that parents did and then told me later. Dilute the remedy in 4 cups of water, give 1 drop, see what happens. Some of it is very much on an intentional level where you're really trying to feel it out. I never learned any of this in homeopathy school, but parents, holy cow, will they tell you all the ways that they've dosed. I've had parents put remedies in milk and in juice. I've had parents say that I just put the glass right there and it has an effect on the kid. Or I have parents who are like, oh, I put the pellet in water and then have them drink it, every, a half an hour. So There's so many ways that you can dose it. And I love it when parents really are like, wow, they believe in the remedy. And if you can give them the kind of the breadth to work with that remedy and say, it's okay, it's safe. You know, homeopathic remedies are gentle, they're safe, they're energetic. Just go into it with an open heart that's really feeling what's going on here. Desiree does the paper remedy. So Desiree lives in Sri Lanka, where it's not always easy to get remedies to. And so sometimes I will literally have her write the name of the remedy down, and that will create some effect too, because it's the intention of bringing that remedy up. You know, when I was pregnant and nauseated with general nausea, I would get like nauseated, and I would say the word ipecac whenever I got nauseated, and it calmed my nausea down. I'd say ipecac. And I didn't take the remedy because, one, I wouldn't always have it on me, and two, I was just like, I don't feel like I want to take that remedy. And I just didn't feel like taking it, and I would just say it to myself, and it would bring my nausea down. That sounds, maybe that's too out there for some people. All right. Okay. So here's a kind of a complex slide that I spent a little extra time on for this class. And it's meant to be kind of a lot of showing a big picture. Okay, so this little pink box up above represents the self. It represents our body, our immunity. And my sense is that when we are healthy, when we have a healthy immunity, we express ourselves openly. We're able to express joy, self-love, communicate openly. We're connected to people. We're connected to our emotions. We're connected to the earth. We're grounded. We're connected to the sky. We're spiritually open. We're connected, and we do things that support our vital force. To support our natural healing energy. So that's the number one thing. I have cases that I work on where I'm like helping with the constitutional, and we're doing clears and noses, but the vital force is really weak. You know, the child is not getting outside. There's no connection happening to that kind of vitality that makes you want to live, that makes you want to be here on this planet. You know, you could clear up the energy of the child, but if they're like, they've decided, I want to be off planet, you know, it can be challenging to get them to want to be here. If they feel like being here is a miserable thing. You know, so that can be a challenge. So in this chart, I do have it where on the left side of this chart, this is kind of where immunity is on the most exterior, where we are supposed to be fighting stuff off on the skin level, right? Where we get rashes and itching. And we get, you know, more constitutional remedies that are well known, like sulfur and calc carb. And then when we start to move in the direction of deterioration to the right, you know, we can start getting kind of gastrointestinal stuff and dysbiosis and whining and irritability. And we could need remedies that more have to do with gastro stuff, like Cena. This is supposed to be Dioscorea, colosynthis, lycopodium. I believe this is supposed to be I'm not sure what EUPH was supposed to be. And then let's see. And then things can move into the lungs, and, you know, coughs, colds. The lungs, we get a lot of fatigue, a lot of sadness, and you've got lung remedies. And then as we start to kind of get more deteriorated, we get into kind of suppression of the emotions. There's a lot of remedies where there's deep suppression of emotionality and self-expression, the heart and the emotions. When I feel like somebody is really not expressing their full emotionality, it feels like that's when the immune system starts to take a hit. And so sometimes the culture of a whole family needs to change, because the culture of a family is around not expressing the emotions. And you've got these really uptight families that don't express themselves, and they're type A and they're in their heads, and then they've got these kids who just have these meltdowns because, you know, they're holding it all together and they're trying to be type A and to do it all, and then they have a rage because they're just so freaking angry that nobody ever says anything in their family, you know. And then the family's like, what's wrong with my kid? You know, it's like, okay, well, maybe somebody in the family needs to express themselves. So the expression of emotions is so important for immunity. And then on this right side is the more deteriorated state, where you have the deeper, the remedies that have to do with more like deep inflammation, negativity, rage, seizures, CNS stuff. Oftentimes it's like remedies like lachesis, or that are like reptile, or spiders, or that have a lot of psychosis, like anacardium, or these inner splits. Chlorum is the remedy of chlorine, and it is not a well-known constitutional remedy, but it should be. It is so helpful for negative people. It is the remedy of negativity. And mothers who are just giving of themselves endlessly to the point where they lose themselves and they're just total passive, aggressive, negative people, chlorum is so helpful for moms who are in that place, who've given everything of themselves, that they have nothing left but just a negative hole. So supporting the vital force, giving constitutional remedies, those two are like kind of the most important pieces. And then doing the drug clears and the nosodes support that. You know, this, I put these on the bottom because this is our base of lac. Yeah, sorry, lac is milk remedies. So the milk remedies are really good for suppression, especially lac caninum, dog milk, lac equinum, horse milk. They tend to be, you know, if you think of like especially the domesticated animals that are meant to kind of suppress their natural instincts, the lac remedies tend to be really good for clearing out suppression of emotions. Anacar is anacardium. Like if a child was not breastfed. So yes, so there's lac maternum, which is the remedy of breast milk. Also an amazing remedy for helping kids improve their, it's like carcinosin, you know, it really helps with immunity, helps connect to a sense of like the divine mother, you know, the connecting to the body, being present with the body. I have acute rage PANDAS case that it was lac maternum, you know, and there was a real disconnect with, you know, with the energy of the maternal energy in the family. Not all children who are not breastfed miss out on that. There's plenty of children who get bottle fed but get the love of the mother, and they get the cuddling, and they get the affection, and they connect to their bodies. But say if you have a child who was kept in a, you know, car seat and just shoved a bottle all the time and didn't get that love and affection, the lac maternum can be helpful. Lac maternum, and a really good group of remedies to learn about in treating kids, is what is called the matridonal remedies. I'll type it in here. It's matridonal, matridonal. They're remedies from the woman's pregnancy process. So includes placenta, amniotic fluid, placenta, amniotic fluid, umbilical cord, what else am I missing? Breast milk. There may be another one or two of them in there. And there's a book by a homeopath. Her name is Melissa Asylum. It's so good on the matrodonal remedies. It's just incredible for kids who have been adopted, who have had traumatic births, who basically want to go back into the womb or press the restart button. So, okay, back to the nosodes. So these nosodes, egg donor babies, yeah. We'll talk more about the nosodes today. All right. Okay. So what is PANDAS and PANS? So this class was built around PANDAS and PANS. PANDAS is the abbreviation for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders Associated with Strep Infections, used to describe a subset of children who have OCD or tic disorders whose symptoms worsen following strep infections. Pretty straightforward. It's a very narrow and specific diagnosis. PANS is a newer term used to describe a larger class of acute onset OCD and tics associated with infections beyond strep, like viral infections and Lyme's. Oftentimes it's Lyme's. What I have found in a lot of PANDAS cases that when you first start with the strep, there's other layers of immunity, like viral infections and Lyme disease, that need to be understood and treated as well. On an autism level, autistic kids, well, I guess I'll get to this. So PANDAS diagnosis, you can read this. Pre-puberty, it's not always pre-puberty. Actually, a lot of PANDAS I see is, you know, kind of at puberty or at 15 or 16, and it's still PANDAS. Separation anxiety, motor hyperactivity, sensory abnormalities. Usually kids, their cognitive goes down, developmental regression. PANS, very similar. And the standard treatment for PANDAS and PANS is antibiotics, steroids, and IVIG, which works. And it's kind of also sad because from my perspective is that PANDAS is partially in existence because of the overuse of antibiotics culturally. That strep has gone deeper into the immune system and kind of essentially evaded immunity. And at some point, we will have drug-resistant strep, or maybe that's what we already have. Does the diagnosis matter? Some of you have autistic kids that are watching, and you're wondering, does my kid have PANDAS and PANS also? That doesn't matter. I mean, essentially, if your child is autistic, they're having the subset of behaviors that you see in PANDAS and PANS. You're just not getting the acute kind of black and white, you know, your kid was doing great and then they fell off the cliff. Essentially, you're having the symptoms, the immune symptoms present in PANDAS and PANS, but they developed much earlier in your child before they had the developmental milestones. Would you say there are more PANDAS kids in the last 10 years or so than? Absolutely. It's like a new diagnosis. And I think it's probably just kind of, you know, growing pretty rapidly. In the same way that all these diagnoses are, you know, ADHD and, you know, all these like neurological, you know, tics and twitches and seizures in kids. I mean, it's across the board, you know, the number of chronic diseases in children is just epidemic. So in homeopathy, we treat the patient, not the diagnosis. So that's important. Okay. You know, lab diagnosis can be helpful. Some labs for pandas and pans, they will say, you know, what the child has positive titers for, and it'll be for Mycoplasma or Coxsackie, and maybe like 1 band for Lyme's. That can be helpful, but I have also had cases where like nothing's, you know, no Lyme. This is really common. No Lyme shows up, but I muscle test Lyme. I had a PANDAS case of a girl who was really sweet, wonderful child who was raging and sensory sensitive, and just went rapidly into a PANDAS kind of diagnostic picture. And my muscle testing was just, for some reason, I'm muscle testing that she needed Bartonella and to be cleared of Lyme nosodes, and that's what we did, and that was what was most important. So that's my feeling. Oh, back to the Klinghardt. Somebody had asked me about Klinghardt and ART, and you know, I find muscle testing, and now tons of chiropractors do this too, and chiropractors develop their own ways, and I think it can be useful to learn from somebody who knows how to do it, but it's all about practice, and I think you can do it in a very simple way. You know, for me, it's just yes or no. Do I get a yes or do I get a no? And if it's a yes, I can also kind of ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense or how important is this? With the ART testing, I think there's some complexities that are added in. And I think some people sometimes want a very kind of complex system because it makes them feel like it's more real. But the most important thing is to get your mind out of the way. I can just say that. Like, just say, I have no idea what the answer is. I have no idea what to do here, because that tells your brain, get out of the way. You have no idea. What do you think you're thinking? You know? So, and then to muscle test from there. Okay. All right. So I have a PANDAS case example here, and this is a pretty straightforward, easy case. You know, I've had maybe like 30, maybe 40% of the PANDAS cases had a kind of a straightforward picture like this, and then some of them are like middle of the ground and a lot harder than this, and some of them are, you know, maybe a small percent are much more on the impossible place. Okay, so Sean is a sweet, easygoing boy. He's 8 years old, never getting into trouble. You know, and it's these kids. I've definitely seen a lot of these kids. They're the ones who are just trying to do their best by their teachers and their parents, and they're holding it all together. This fits in homeopathy what's termed as the cancer miasm, fitting for the remedy carcinosin, wanting to please everybody, not having a strong self-identity, and so kind of ignoring myself and my needs, and pleasing others, and you know, trying to hold it all together, but not expressing themselves in a way that would be healthy. And so eventually things all build up, and there's a crash. You know, there's a real crash and burn. So this boy was sweet, easygoing. He was a twin. Both of the twins actually developed PANDAS here. I'm just giving the example of one. Never had reaction to vaccines. Didn't have high fevers. Never had anything. At age 8, without obvious provocation, he has a sudden, drastic, overnight change in behavior. He goes from happy and easygoing to highly irritable, highly emotional, rigid, defiant, and crying. Literally an overnight transformation from a sweet boy to an emotional wreck. Lab tests show high titers for strep, and I believe there was a positive Lyme picture too. After multiple doctor visits, he was given a diagnosis as Lyme-induced PANDAS. He was put on antibiotics and supplements with no improvement. Okay. The first noticeable change is defiance. If things didn't go his way, he'd react very emotionally. And this is why I put in that larger diagram, when the emotions aren't fully expressed, then we're not getting a release of what the immune system needs. So he wasn't that way, and then he started to get super emotional. He asked for water when I brought him a cup, and he thought there were spiders in the water. So some kids start to have literal hallucinations. He started to see like spiders and black things. That actually happens. You know, I've seen a good handful of people with Lyme's disease have the spider issue or see spiders or definitely start to hallucinate things. He developed a negative, scared outlook. Well, strep is associated with autoimmunity. What is autoimmunity? It's self-attack, right? And so self-attack is saying, I'm shit, I'm crap, I suck, right? So the actual expression of self-attack is self-negativity, directing the inner critic onto yourself is associated with strep and self-attack and autoimmunity. So maybe that's an aha moment for some of you. So when he's at his worst, he cries. If things are not going his way, he cries. He needs to be first. If his siblings were not sitting symmetrically under the sign, he would start to cry in a panicky way, full-blown emotions. At first, his outbursts would only happen with his brother, sister, dad, and mom. And then it started to happen everywhere, like at Starbucks. He said he wants to die. He got super emotional, super neurotic about his hair. Reading fluency dropped. Used to enjoy learning. Now he doesn't want to do math anymore. Says his brain can't do it. He used to be a good eater, and then he stopped being a good eater. He started a breathing, humming tic. He started a facial tic. And then he was just like, I don't feel good. Saying I'm too tired. His sleep is horrible. He says his body hurts, wants to be carried. Okay. All right. So I gave him a constitutional. My constitutional for him ended up being Nat Sulf. You're not going to find out why because I didn't put all of the information in. I gave Nat Sulf based on the sensation that the mom gave me. His head hurt. He felt alone and sad. I might have muscle tested it a bit. And then I gave strep. So I gave Nat Sulf once a week, strep twice a week. Right away, he's doing amazing. Mom's like, I could cry. He's happy. He still gets scared overnight. His tics keep kind of shifting and moving. Now so he maintains with the tics, but his behavior just totally improves. So we continued more with the strep nosode. Some facial tics eventually came back, and we did more of the strep, and then we did the Coxsackie nosode because it came up on lab tests. And I believe the Coxsackie nosode is what eventually helped with the tics. So that was just like a, yay, happy, done, case closed, healthy, happy kid again, family's doing great. There was some stress in the family. There was some like minor family drama. And for some reason it could have like really impacted this child too. But this was a really wonderful case where I gave the strep remedy to help with what seemed like suppressed strep in his system and a constitutional, and there was a recovery. Okay. All right. So I put in a bathroom break right here. That was a lot. I'm going to start talking about the nosodes for another hour. Let me stop sharing this, and I'm just going to pause the recording. Okay, so just starting again. All right, so when to use nosodes. So people sometimes feel nervous about using nosodes because they are from a disease material source, but to remember that there isn't actually any of that substance in there. You want to give a nosode essentially when it's usually in the more severe cases. Oftentimes when I'm starting off on a case, is when I'm using more nosodes. As the case kind of clears up, the nosode, the disease picture gets out of the way, then I'm giving more and more constitutional remedies. But the feeling of a nosode is a core feeling that there's something wrong. Like if they're in meditation, the feeling is I don't feel like myself. Like the feeling is that something is there and it's not me. There's something expressing itself. I feel abnormal. This doesn't feel right. The sense of self, that little orange box I had in that last slide, that sense of self has been totally overlaid with something else that doesn't feel me. So there's a low sense of a self, low self-esteem, this feeling of maybe, there's out of control, there's other things, there's a lot of intrusive thoughts, fears, delusions, OCDs, stimming behaviors, mood swings, and then suppressed emotions I've talked about. Suppressed emotions, oftentimes emotions, it's a chicken or an egg thing. Emotions are suppressed, which allows for lowered immunity and then infection to kind of take its place. And then the emotions stay suppressed. So for example, oftentimes after I clear pathogens associated with the lungs, grief comes up and needs to be expressed. Sadness needs to crying needs to happen. Healing is feeling. So, okay. All right, how to dose nosodes. Essentially, I'm giving 30C through 200C to start off with. And if a nosode is really helpful in 30C or 200C, I will move up to 1M, 10M, or even CM. Sometimes strep nosodes can be useful in really high potencies like that. There are also lower potencies. Below a 6C, you do start to theoretically have the substance of the disease in the remedy, which is why I generally don't give below 6C. Let me make sure that I can see your chat. I'm not seeing the chat box right now. So, oh, here we go. Okay. Muscle testing around the dosing the nosodes help too. Some of the responses that you can have to dosing a nosode is a healthy immune response. If it's a rash, sleepiness, fever, it usually doesn't last for more than a few days. This mom who I met with recently, her child had the Bartonella kind of rash that looks like stripes or scratches across the back, and boils came out at the back, so that was a really strong kind of discharge reaction. But, we shouldn't fear the body's natural reactions. Okay. I have in the notes that I sent you in Word a lot of diagrams that look like this. They are based on kind of ways that we can think about dosing. So if you have a really intense flare, intense situation, and this is not just for nosodes, this is for any remedies, you can give a higher potency. If you have something kind of mild and chronic, you can give the lower potency. I have a child with that I've been treating with chronic molluscum, these little warts on his knees, and he's having a subtle tick, and the mom just wants to give, very low dose of a 30C, and I'm fine with that. It just feels like she just wants to approach it slowly and gently. And then somebody just emailed me recently, and they said they got a huge injury to their knee, where they slammed into a wall while playing ice hockey, and the knee did not respond to arnica 200C, but it responded really well to arnica 1M or 10M, something like that. And this just goes to show you, like, the intensity of the situation can be matched by the intensity of the potency. You know, so if there's a really intense flare, or there's a really intense acute or infection, you know, an intense childbirth situation, you can give these higher potencies, if that makes sense. The frequency of dosing, usually the higher the potency, the less frequently you need to give it, and the lower potencies you can give more frequently. So an X potency, which is not very strong, and usually like the teething tablets and the formulas that you can find for like the flu and basic acutes, they have a lot of X potency remedies. They can be taken a few times a day. C potency remedies can be taken 6C, 12C, 30C, you know, once a day to once a week. And then the 200C and the 1M kind of more like once or twice a week, and a 10M, you know, less frequently. Any questions on dosing? A lot of people had questions on aggravations, you know, fear around aggravations, or situations where the situation got aggravated, and that can be really confusing. The hardest part in these cases is case management, you know. So an aggravation zapper is essentially a way of dissolving a potency down to create a different potency. So you'll take, say if a child aggravated with Cena 200C, you can dilute it in some water and then dump it out and add water, dump it out and add water, and dump it out and add water a couple times. I mean, it can be 10 times, it can be 5 times, and then drink that water. It's like, it's almost like shifting the effect of like saying, it's almost as if you like push too hard and then you kind of backtracked a little bit, you know, with giving an aggravation zapper. I've always seen it help. And then again, if from my sense is if you muscle test, you get a lot less aggravations. Another thing that you can do is sip dose. Sip dosing helps with aggravation. Say you gave a potency of a remedy and it brought something to the surface. Sometimes taking that same potency and putting it in 8 ounces of water and dissolving it and having somebody sip on it slowly through a period of time helps move whatever it is that came up through, or it can bring a detox even further to the surface. Okay, so I'm going to talk about different types of nosodes. I don't want to get like too bogged down in the details of it, and I want to keep it big picture. So some of this gets really detailed in the notes that I sent out to you, and some of it is, I'll just try to kind of not get too complicated here. So there's a lot of, so strep, we can never get rid of strep, right? It's omnipresent. You don't take antibiotics and it like wipes out all the strep in your body and then you get exposed to it again. It's meant to be an omnipresent bacteria. Same with parasites and viruses. You know, we have all of these bugs. The point of healing is finding balance and equilibrium with these bugs. Strep, there's strep that is, maybe I'll just scroll down to here. The most common form of strep remedy that is given is streptococcinum, which is also strep pyogenes. This is the classic sore throat strep. In most kids, this is the remedy that you're gonna give. The ticks can be around the face, mouth, and throat. There can be some stomach pains. There's a history of throat, sinus infections, that kind of oppositional teen attitude comes up with strep pyogenes. Strep pneumonia is strep that's in the chest. It's also known as pneumococcinum. There can be coughing tics, bad upper respiratory stuff, breathlessness, you know, a negativity associated with exhaustion and lung stuff. There are other lung-associated nosodes. Mycoplasma, which is walking pneumonia, often is helpful to give following or around strep pneumonia or pneumococcinum. Strep faecalis is like fecal strep or gut strep. It's also known as enterococcinum. These are when the issues, when you get that perianal strep, you know, the anorexia, the nausea, all the GI stuff, a lot of kind of more of just the gut stuff. There can be sinus issues because the sinus relates to the GI too. And the tics are likely to be less prominent, but you'll still see oppositional and confrontational behavior. Strep viridans, you know, this is according to Michelle, another homeopath, feels like it's big with parasites. I rarely use it. Strep dysagalactiae, which is group C strep, can come up when there are skin and eye issues or acne. Essentially, I would give that if I muscle tested for it. Strep agalactiae is the strep that they test for neonatal transmission. So they test for it during pregnancy and transmission to the baby. And that could be a remedy to clear if the mother had antibiotics for GBS. But I haven't felt that was necessary all the time. Scarlatinum is a separate nosode made from the skin cell, the throat cells of scarlet fever patients. When there's a strong family history of autoimmunity, joint pains, circulatory cardiac disorders, scarlatina comes up. I just recently gave it to a PANDAS patient with lots of tics. And this is the one she just muscle tested for some reason. And then some remedies. I listed these commonly given with the strep nosode. And these are mostly remedies, you know, that are constitutional remedies that I've seen in a lot of PANDAS cases. So it could be a PANDAS cases where there's just an immense amount of grief in the family. You know, somebody died. You know, if there was a death during pregnancy, oh my goodness, that death and that grief, it really imprints on the child. And remedies like Natmir or Aurum. There's a suicide in the family that can really, you know, transmit to the child on some energetic level. When self-suppression and self-hate, nobody walks around and says, like, I'm a self-hating person, but you have to pick up on it when you're taking the case, you know. It's just a sense of low self-worth, or oftentimes through how they've been treated or allowed themselves to be treated. They've been abused, they've been bullied, people like that. Sothuya, lacmaternum, carcinosin. A lot of these remedies are in the Book of Life in charts like this. When GI issues are really prominent, there's so many important GI remedies. Oh yeah, euphorbium. Euphorbium is an interesting GI remedy where there's a lot of like burning, stretching, you know, GI pains. When rage and tantrum is big, belladonna, hyos, and stramonium. Those three remedies are key. They're all from the nightshade family. Sina and the snake and the spider remedies. A lot of PANDAS cases, a lot of autism too. Deep down, there's a snake or a spider which have these kind of manipulative, dark, infectious pieces, and it results in this kind of like a kind of an animal behavior that's present. It's that darker layer. Ugh. Okay, when tics and twitches, I say this at the very end of the class. What's the hardest thing to work on? Tics and twitches do go away when you treat with homeopathy, but they're also some of the easiest things to come back. And sometimes I get a lot of parents where it's like everything's really gotten better in the child, but they still have this one tick or twitch. And the way that I see it is it's as if their body has had a crumple in its system. It's like a fold that crumple like never really goes away, and any little stress can bring that tick back. And it's just a challenging thing that you need to continue to work with, you know, and it's not just homeopathy always that's needed. Oftentimes, tons of fears and panic are prominent in PANDAS cases. Aconite, arsenicum, calc carb, gelsemium, a lot of cases that are bogged down by viral infections, and then remedies well known for treating the flu can be really helpful. So bryonia, eupatorium, gelsemium, nux vomica are all well known as flu remedies, and those can also be helpful for chronic immunodeficient kids. When rigidity is prominent, ferromet, cupromet, like these metals, these like really hard-headed kids that want their own way, calc carbs, stubborn, and a lot of that is, you know, to cover up a deep weakness. And then poor detox. I mean, sulfur and remedies like sulfur, like sulfanilamide, which is the remedy from sulfa drugs, that can be helpful too. Just too much for everyone? You guys overwhelmed? I'll get more to this tomorrow. Okay. Nope. Awesome. Okay. All right. These are in the notes, and I could go into it deeper. I just put this in this morning. Other bacterial nosodes that I didn't put in this presentation. Clostridia is a big one that comes up in kids who've been on a lot of antibiotics, and they have stinky bowel movements. Like people are like, it's like the worst garbage smell, and it's green. And what I've seen with kids with Clostridia is a lot of like self-abusive behaviors, a lot of hiding too. Kids will want to put, like, I've definitely seen for some reason kids with Clostridia wearing hoods. They want to put a hood over their head. Mycoplasma is a huge co-infection with a lot of lung stuff, and it's just a feeling of sadness. Mycoplasma pneumonia is just this like disconnected, low energy. I just want to like sit here and do nothing, and I'm depressed, and it's just like taking the life force out of you. Mycoplasma, and that remedy can really help that person regain their vitality. And then Staph aureus or Staphylococcinum. Staphylococcinum is also drug resistant, and it becomes MRSA. So MRSA is what you see in hospitals because they use so much antibiotics in hospitals. MRSA, the picture looks, or staph and MRSA, the picture looks a lot like strep, where there's oppositional, angry, defiance kind of energy. Actually, I didn't put all the strep. Yeah, I guess it's. If you guys, in the notes, I have more information on strep, more on like the OCD. Basically, a lot of the symptoms that you see concomitant with the PANDAS diagnosis are the strep materia medica. Staph aureus has the same picture. With Staph aureus, I often see though boils and acne, like a lot of like skin infections. You know, it's omnipresent on the skin, sinus infections, like maybe like a wound on the nostril that's kind of suppurating and pussy. That might do well with Staph aureus. Kids with like pussy cystic acne can do really well with Staph aureus. Self-harming, almost all the bacterial nosodes have the self-harming picture. Strep for sure, Clostridia, Staph aureus, but also parasites. Parasites tend to have a little bit more of like, I hit you, you know, like I'm attacking you, like the parasite itself. So if you think about what we talked about before, where it's like the energy of the bug itself, the parasites do attack, right? Like they come into your system, they invade your boundaries, they take over, they want to grow in there, you know. So, you know, the parasites have a little bit more of an attacking energy, whereas the bacteria tends to, from my experience, have a self-attack energy to it. Klebsiella is another one. Klebsiella is kind of like a lung bacteria, but I think it has gut associations too, and I've seen a lot of like anger and self-abuse with Klebsiella. It's not in like, it's funny because like the only 2 or 3 major cases I've given that, they've all been in Florida. And Florida has weird bugs going on, I think. Okay. There's also teenager cutting. Yeah, teenager cutting can totally be helped with strep, anacardium, remedies like a lot of like self-harm, self-hate. Thuya. Thuya is a really amazing remedy for when teenagers have that feeling of needing to fit in and they're like getting too much media influence and then there's this part of them that just like loses touch with themselves and they like kind of cut themselves to try and feel themselves again. So Thuya is a great teenager remedy. The bowel nosodes. So there's classic bowel nosodes that are known in homeopathy, and then there's not classic bowel nosodes. The classic ones were developed by Edward Bach, who also developed flower essences. And the Bach nosodes basically can be useful. I mean, I also, they have such similar, sometimes they have such similar like keynotes and information. It's hard to know how to prescribe them just based on reading the Materia Medica for them. So I do think it's helpful to muscle test around it. That being said, you know, lab tests can help too. You know, remedies like E. coli and salmonella, which are really common remedies from food poisoning, they can be really helpful for a deep, draggy, low energy feeling that you didn't even realize you had, but you had enough food poisoning in your life that you developed some issue with salmonella or E. coli. I'll get to candida soon. There is a remedy available called polybowel nosode, which is all of the Bach nosodes in combination, which I have found useful sometimes. And then there's a remedy called polybowel plus. And it was created by Tone Janssen, a homeopath in Europe. And he put all the Bach nosodes, plus he added homeopathic enzymes and the Candida nosode. So that's possible and available. There are also nosodes from parasites. There's the nosode from flukes and roundworms and hookworms and okay. So viral nosodes. So the energy of viruses is a little bit like my appointment or this class today, which is trying to do a lot. You know, overdoing to meet the expectations of others, going. But my bathroom break was me trying to take a break and rest and step back, you know. But when we are in this modern culture so overwhelmed with so much media and taking in like nonstop cell phones staring at, nonstop computers and internet, we are inundating our body with more information than it knows what to deal with. We're bombarding it in a way we're weakening our immune system and we're allowing viral information to come in. I really find that virally people need to take total media breaks. Like they need to just stop everything when it comes to cell phones, TVs, computers, because the body needs to have a break and know what to throw out. And when we get the flu, which is a virus, essentially that's what our body does. It shuts down and our eyes hurt and maybe we can watch TV, but you really need to just like stop. You know, stop doing so much. Like where I lived on the East Coast in New York was a very type A going. I lived in the suburbs of New York City. I grew up there. Everybody has to do a million and one things all the time, right? It's like your kids are going to like 5 different leagues and, in violin lessons and, needing to get the SAT score this, and like the parents are working 9 to 5 jobs, and everyone's so exhausted, and then everybody gets the flu, and a hurricane comes and it just shuts everything down, and that's needed. We need that. To vaccinate against every flu is crazy business because our body's trying to do what comes naturally, which is to shut down, clean itself out, slow down. Okay. So the viral noses I didn't put into a lot of detail here. The most important one is influenzae. So just having influenzae around, it's pretty synonymous in a way with oscillococcinum, which is sold by Boiron and sold in Whole Foods. They're essentially very similar in that they approach giving the body the energy of the influenza energy to help clear it out. And then, some of these other ones like, Coxsackie, herpes, hepatitis, Lysinum is the rabies virus, varicella is chickenpox. Some of these are just so important and useful for the tics, the twitches. They're so important for autism and helping reduce the stimming. It doesn't always, it's like if I'm giving these nosodes and the kid is still always on their iPad, it's kind of like they're still stimming because they're still getting that information. But for sure, a lot of this viral stuff, it seems to really impact the central nervous system and the brain. I've seen the chickenpox vaccine and the varicella virus from that really problematic when it comes to mental stuff and verbal, and there's so much here. There's the HPV vaccine now and clearing that. Yeah. There's also a really, really awesome nosode called vaccininum, and vaccininum is the pox virus nosode. So it kind of underlies a lot of these, vaccinium, vaccinium. I don't think I'm spelling this right. vaccinium. Vaccinium. That can be a really useful nosode for just viruses in general that I use a lot. Any questions there? The fungal nosodes, I mean, these are some rare and unusual fungal nosodes, but the most common ones, Candida albicans. The energy around a fungal infection is the feeling of being like giddy and spaced out, and I had too much sugar, so I'm laughing and running around in circles and spinning, and so many kids are like this all the time. It's kind of like the norm in a lot of children, but it is the yeasty picture. Candida can help with that. I have to say that, like, oftentimes you give one nosode and the picture changes, and then you go to the next nosode and then the picture changes, and you kind of like, sometimes it's like chasing the tail of a dragon because they all balance each other out. The negativity of strep and the OCD is kind of balanced out by the spacey, happy messiness of Candida, right? And so in some ways, they're meant to balance each other out energetically. Okay. Tarula is the remedy of, I believe, baker's yeast or just yeast. That can be really useful. There's some nosodes. A really useful remedy is called mixed mold. So nowadays, everyone's having issues with mold, you know, and remediating their houses with mold. This combination remedy, it's made by Helios. It has all of these mold remedies in it, and it can really help with allergies, oversensitivities to mold, to do a clear of mixed mold. So. The Lyme nosodes. So the Lyme nosodes are really at the bottom layer oftentimes, of everything else kind of being out of balance. And it seems like Lyme is omnipresent in lots of ways these days. Some people say, I think everybody has Lyme, and it's just a matter of when it presents and how it presents. And it's really, you know, these nosodes can be quite helpful. I listed these as kind of like deep CNS or central nervous system nosodes. The remedy from meningitis, Borrelia, syphilinum, can be really, really important. One of the most important remedies in a lot of PANDAS or Lyme-induced PANDAS cases is Bartonella. And you know, it's this very dark nosode. It's what I would most closely associate with syphilinum or lachesis, where there's just a real invasion of the mind of very dark thoughts, delusional fears, rage, psychosis. For cease, you know, for all of these remedies, my approach is to muscle test. So I might start with a 200C or a 1M right off the bat. But from a cease point of view, you would start with 30C twice a week, and then go to 200C twice a week, and then 1M twice a week. But then use the potency as long as it's helpful. You know, start with 30C, give it every 3 days. As long as it's helping, give it every 3 days, and then move up systematically to 200C to 1M and then to 10M. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Right, we've kind of talked about vaccine clearing. There's also medications that can be cleared. Some people refer to this as tautopathy. It's when you clear things like the vaccines, but also, you know, birth control, labor meds, steroids. Those that can be very, very helpful. It kind of, you know, oftentimes the response that was meant to take place, if you hadn't have had the steroids or if you hadn't have had the Tylenol, then takes place. It's like it allows the body to have its fever, to have its reaction. Can I use camphora to clear the drug layer? You know, I've used camphora for anesthesia drug layer, and that's it. That's my experience, is to use camphora for anesthesia overdose from birth. But that's a good question, and I'm curious where that comes from. I have cases where I've also given aluminum 12C or mercurius 12C once a day or once every other day to help bring those levels down, and it's worked. So that's a pretty amazing and interesting thing. Now, not all metals are problematic. You know, you don't need a, you know, I've done this in cases where that metal was off the chart. You know, you know, you can also tell if the materia medica of that metal matches the child. So for aluminum, the issue is being in a fog, you know, and slow reflexes. So if you feel like aluminum is a problem, plus my child is in a fog with slow reflexes and they have dry mucous membranes, those are alumina symptoms, and you can give that remedy to help bring aluminum down. Of the metals, probably the most frequently one that I'm giving is aluminum, followed by mercury, the detox. Oh, Bondry uses camphora. Okay. All right. So there's people clear ultrasound, glyphosate, pesticides, MSG, corn syrup, um, alcohol, plastic. Listed here are some of those combination remedies that are available for clearing some of those things. Polyautotoxins. So these are toxins from automobiles. I had a child that I gave the remedy. She lived in Los Angeles near an overpass, and we gave her, she was autistic, we gave her the remedy from car exhaust, and she developed a fever reaction. And that was like one of the few remedies, she did well with remedies, but one of the few remedies she actually developed a fever reaction to. So that was really interesting. Clearing antidepressants can be helpful. I've heard parents say that, I took Prozac during my pregnancy, and they clear it, and this one mom was like, I felt like this deep central nervous system ache was trying to move its way out of my body. This is a chart on symptoms related to vaccines that you can base a vaccine clear on. They're pretty much the side effects that are known of vaccines, in the brochure on the vaccines. So people really get nervous about what to expect. It's just standard physical reactions for the most part. Rashes, fevers, stinky BMs, sometimes no response. I have heard of homeopaths who really aggressively like we'll give like a 10M and a bunch of it, and I don't think that that's necessary because you can aggravate and create problems that way. And a constitutional remedy is always important. Okay. Yes, you can. Muscle test. Yeah. Okay, so we're almost near the end of the class. I'm going to go over one case study. And then if you guys have any questions, I'll stop the recording and you guys can ask questions. And then tomorrow what we're going to do is just talk about more constitutional remedies and some more cases and questions and dosing and such. Let's just do this. So this is just one case I found in my notes. Okay, so, oh, here we go. All right. So this was an autism case, okay? So this was a boy, was 3 years old, and he recovered from autism from homeopathy. So this is a positive case. It's a lot easier to recover a child from autism the younger they are. But the complexity is standard. He started off with like nonverbal, a lot of difficult behavior, a lot of issues centered on his GI system, a lot of layers that had to go through. So I'm just going to kind of talk through what it is that I did. So the mother was a pretty healthy person. She was young, but she felt like she had a lot of drama and stress from her in-laws. She felt when she was pregnant, she felt this like punching sensation in her stomach, like the kid was angry at her. The child was born C-section. As an infant, he didn't make good eye contact. He had a slight fever from one set of vaccinations. Another fever, from an upper respiratory tract infection. He had a strong personality. He was a cute kid. He had a lot of likes and dislikes. He wasn't shy. But he wouldn't engage in reciprocal play with other kids. He would engage with adults. He wanted to be a part of the group. He liked attention. He liked affection. but would be jealous when other people took that away from him. He was unable to voice what he wanted. He would have tantrums or be physically aggressive. He was a very strong-willed kid, but he seemed really smart. Actually, now this kid is very gifted, so he was kind of ahead of the curve on another level. He knew his alphabet. He knew his numbers, even by 3, right? He was doing a lot of sensory stimming, lining up of toys, running things back and forth, looking at them on the side of his eyes, looking at patterns in the carpet. He had a lot of stomach pains, a lot of gas and bloating, white clay stools. He was even losing weight. He had dark circles under his eyes. He was always rubbing and pressing his eyes, always sweating. High pain threshold. He would hurt himself and not cry. So based on the GI symptoms, constitutionally, I gave him chelidonium. The nozo that I gave to him was strep for the OCD, the lining up of things, the oppositional behavior. So he got chelidonium 30C once a day, and then strep 30C once a day. So, okay. If you have any questions, just put them. So overall, the first prescriptions he had worsening of the stimming. His stimming got worse. He started to stare at his palms. So we were worried about this, but he wasn't lining up and he wasn't as OCD. So he had an improvement on one side and then something else come up. And then he started to get a dry cough. So I felt like we needed to detox the DTaP vaccine, partly because of the cough. So I gave DTaP 200C every 3 days for 4 total doses. After the DTaP, an increase in vocalizing. He's saying more gibberish, spitting out words, saying mommy, daddy. And the mother felt like his forehead was hotter than before. Less bloated. I mean, he might have been getting less bloated as well because of the chelidonium that I was giving. Appetite increased. On the other hand, he started getting more aggressive in hitting and finding it funny. And this aggressive and hitting is very often, I can send you this case. I'll email this case out. This hitting is very much associated with parasites. It's just like, it's like, okay, Sina. Parasites is one of the hardest things to treat. And I don't say it's like impossible to treat, but homeopathy helps, but sometimes you need herbal and sometimes you need pharmaceutical. It's one of the few places where I feel like the pharmaceuticals do help. Part of this I also feel as I read a book called Parasite Rex about parasites, and the body has a hard time immunologically sometimes with parasites because they're so big and intelligent that the body kind of sometimes just learns to deal with them. Right. You have pets that the children are attached to, so I usually give some sort of homeopathic for parasites. Often it's Sina, but there are some other homeopathics for parasites like Felix moss or granatum, and then I try to do an herbal too. If they're really bad, I will ask the parent to find some mebendazole, and that can help. And then if they're consistently bad, to give, which they often are, to do like a little homeopathic or herbal protocol around the time of the full moon and the new moon. Okay. So we did his nail biting, increase, hitting. So we did Sina, 200C once a day for 3 days, plus an anti-parasitic herbal tincture. His violent behavior calmed down. He started gaining weight and growing. He was becoming more vocal and verbal, and his school teachers were shocked with his progress. He continued to do better with kids, playing with them more readily, making eye contact. His gut still had some problems with bloating and constipation, and sugar would set him off. We switched his gut remedy to Lycopodium 200C twice a week, and I continue doing the DTaP clear, DPT 1M once a week. So his progress begins to speed up. He has new words coming every day. His vocabulary is expanding. He has meaningful conversations. His socializing is improving. He's surprising his mom. He does really well with letters, counting, animals, reading books. And he's still less than 3 at this point. So people are kind of surprised because he's so smart. He's still hyperactive, giggly, and visually stimming. So the giggling plus the visual stim, possibly, visual stim can be a lot of things, but for sure the giggling I gave Candida for. And then I moved on to another vaccine clear. We did Hep B vaccine, 30C, 200C, and 1M. He continued to progress, language explodes. Visual stimming is the last behavior to go away. At this point, I want to continue with the vaccine clears, but I add in zinc. Zinc is a really good homeopathic remedy for repetitive neurologic behaviors. So we do MMR clear and the zinc clear. And he basically, with that MMR and the zinc clear, he continues to do well, but his behaviors still hold out. And I continue with it, and he starts developing cold symptoms, which are good because he didn't get sick a lot, but he got sick more. His speech improves, his stimming calms down, and then we go up to MMR 1M, and with MMR 1M, the visual stimming finally came down. MMR, I've definitely seen a lot of visual stims. Why did I do the individual vaccine clear and not the poly vaccination? I think it's just what I've been doing. You know, the polyvax as a remedy, it came out even after I started doing this work. I don't even think at the time that I did this case, which, like, I feel like the poly vaccination has been around really within the last maybe 2 or 3 years or something. So, and I'm not sure how he would have responded had I done the poly vaccination clear instead of each individual one. I can't say for sure. But I did each of the major vaccines one by one, and that was helpful. So that's that. And that's it for today. I'm a little bit early since I said class would end at 4:30, but I want to leave some time for answering questions, and I know this is a lot. Have I heard of LDI? Does it differ? So that's low dose immunotherapy. It's similar to the idea, you know, of nosodes. And I know some parents that are doing LDI and homeopathy, but they might be better to answer that question. But my sense is that it's like, it's more, the homeopathy is more on the energetic side, and it's all on the spectrum of how diluted and energized and working on the mental and emotional the substances, you know. So say you had LDI Staph aureus, you know, that might work on a very good physical level. And there's a lot of formulas out there by various, you know, homeopathy companies, Des Bio, and, you know, who do these kind of clearings of nosodes on the more kind of physical level. Sometimes I really feel that the higher potency homeopathics are needed and helpful to get to the more mental and emotional levels. So maybe that's a way to answer it. Lexi, you know, I don't think that LDI may be one of the more positive therapies. IVIG, I think, is sometimes helpful for really immunocompromised kids, but I've also seen IVIG really aggravate kids, you know, and really have a real rough time with it. So, okay. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you, Pam. So, we'll talk again tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking more about the constitutional remedy prescribing, And if you guys have any questions tonight, just send me an email and I'll check my email before we talk again tomorrow. And then once I have both of these classes, well, I'll try, I might be able to send out the recording right now.